amazing, amazing evening with an amazing speaker, an amazing story. But a couple things, if you don't know who F.I.S.H is, let me tell you a little bit about F.I.S.H. We're a little nonprofit based in Olathe that all started out with foods and Marines, feeding our Marines. And it's grown from there. It's grown to service dogs, mobility chairs, all kinds of stuff. Because you know the thing, the way that we find veterans to serve, we call it going fishing. Because Scott, one of our board members, Scott here, how many people come to us for stuff? A lot. But the thing is, those that come to us, usually they're not veterans. They might be wearing a cap or saying they're a veteran, and then we find out that they have dishonorable discharge stuff. We have to go fishing. That's how we find our vets. We go fishing. We go find them. Just this morning, we had a young man that's deployed that got an eviction letter from his apartment, and we get a phone call about this kid. I spoke to the guy, and this morning about 9:12, that $812.75 past due rent was paid. He was deployed. Are you kidding me? That's how F.I.S.H, and because of you guys supporting us, helping us, that's what we're able to do. So that's a little bit about F.I.S.H and what we do. We have a couple big things coming up, but one of the things I wanted to show, if you were at the Armed Forces Day event a couple weeks ago, here's a little taste of what you, if you weren't there, here's a little taste of what you missed. We have a video. What you missed. Please don't miss it next year. All right, don't miss it next year. That event, there was a Vietnam veteran that we've known for a while, for couple decades, that we ended up surprising him, not at that event because of some things going on, but we presented him a track chair that day so he can see his little acreage, I don't know, about 10 acres. You can click on that QR code and you can watch the little video of him talking about it. We also happened to catch a gentleman that he and his family were at the VA mobile vehicle over there talking to some VA guys. And, you know, I love the VA. I'm not a veteran, but I love the VA and what they're doing, but sometimes, you know, they are too slow. So they're over there like this listening to this family talk while this gentleman's in a wheelchair, okay? And as they walked away, obviously discouraged, I caught up with the woman. I said, what was that all about? Well, we've been trying to get a mobility chair for a couple years now, and it's same old things. You know, fill out this paperwork. We filled out that paperwork. It's, you know, we still haven't got anything. My uncle's in this wheelchair. He had a stroke, and he's paralyzed. Really? Yeah. Meet me over there on the sidewalk. And I ran to a couple of our volunteers. Scott was on one of the chairs. We raced down the sidewalk with 2 mobility chairs. I said, Marine, pick one. And his niece started crying. And using his right foot, he pointed to the small one, which was, it breaks apart in 3 pieces. And we put him in the chair. I said, Marine, get the hell out of here. I don't want to see you for a while. And off he went. That's how F.I.S.H operates. We call it going fishing. They don't see us coming. That's what it's all about. We also have an event coming up on Monday, our 10th annual F.I.S.H Combat Golf Tournament. I know, Richard, you're going to be there. I know a lot of you are going to be there. It's already sold out. We have 164 players. But we have, I believe, do we have a little video on that? Or we don't? No, a little video on it. But it's an amazing, amazing event. We're going to present a service dog that day. The service dog's name is Roger Donlin. Anybody know that name, Roger Donlin? I thought you might. He was the first Medal of Honor recipient from Vietnam. Because one of the things that F.I.S.H tries to do with our service dogs is give them a name that the veteran can connect with, someone that's part of the F.I.S.H family. And Colonel Donlin has been a part of the F.I.S.H family. And Colonel Donlin will be at the golf tournament to meet the young man that's getting the service dog. Service dog number 40. That's pretty cool. Yeah. All right. Anybody like music? All right. If you do, great. Here's a free ticket for tomorrow night. Oh, we're so busy. Tomorrow night at Knuckleheads, Andy Ross performed at our third Armed Forces Day event, hon. Was that about right? Third or fourth Armed Forces Day event. An incredible musician. He also has a company that makes safes and concealed carry equipment. And incredible guy. If you want to go, take a picture of that right now. And tomorrow night, you can go and watch Andy Ross and his band perform for free. I know a lot of us are going to that, so I'll give you a second. If you want to take a picture and go to that, Amy, you're a rock and roller, aren't you? Knuckleheads. It's past downtown by the casino, and he is so stinking patriotic. It's unbelievable. He was recently on Newsmax. So, sorry? East Bottoms. There we go. Yeah. It'll be fine. It's you guys, if you've never been there, you're in for an incredible treat. It is a great place to go to. All right, so a few months ago, you guys remember that General Arter was going to be our speaker. The general is still not doing very well. He's out of the hospital. He's recuperating. It'll be a little bit before we see him. I can tell you that in September, we don't have yet a speaker for July or August, but September, Hugh Mills. Anybody know Hugh Mills? Hugh Mills is going to be our speaker, so that's going to be a great night. So anyway, with all that being said, so I had the honor of meeting this guy a little over a year ago. And, man, you know how you meet people in your life and you're like, oh, my gosh, this guy really is a superhero. I know you guys that have raised your right hand to serve our country, each and every one of you, to me, very special, one of our nation's defenders. But when I heard this gentleman's story, I was blown away, because like so humble. And I'm just really thrilled and honored to have tonight as our speaker, retired Lieutenant Colonel Ernie Garcia. So before we get Ernie up here, we're going to play a video and get started that way, all right?
In this life in the Marine Corps, opportunities that I never would have dreamed about having. Some in the mud, some in the rain, some in the snow, but sometimes in a palace, meeting with presidents and kings and queens, sitting at a table negotiating treaties. Sometimes it's hard for me to really believe that some of these things happen. I was born and raised in Garden City, Kansas, born on July 12, 1946, to Philip and Louise Garcia. Graduated from high school in 1964, and then from there I went on to the University of Kansas. And at the time, I was being pursued by the so-called selective service system, which is the draft, and so I knew it was just a matter of time before I was drafted. So I enlisted in the United States Marine Corps. I like the uniform, I like the history, I like the tradition, so I signed up. Little did I know what was in store for me. Throughout my Marine Corps history, active duty and reserve duty, which totaled 40 years.
Do you belong here in these ranks of Marines?
In 1966, I went to boot camp in San Diego. Out of boot camp, I was assigned to the aviation part of the Marine Corps, and I was sent to Jacksonville, Florida, at the Naval Air Station, where I went to school for jet mechanic. Of course, Vietnam was happening about that time, and my first deployment was to Japan. I was in the Air Wing in the Marine Corps in '68. Based on the fact that I was in the reserves and the fact that I was looking to have a job, I looked for opportunities in the reserves to go on active duty. So the opportunity, obviously, during that period was the Vietnam conflict, and so was in and out of Vietnam all the time in support of the F.4 and the F.H. Then from there, was assigned to a helicopter unit. From that came the opportunity to be a helo crew member, and then became a gunner. Adrenaline flow of being up in a Huey with a 50 caliber machine gun, that was what it was all about for me. So 68, 69, 70, in and out of the reserves, active duty, air wing, and then in 1970, I believe, I came back off of reserves and for a period of time was a civilian, full-time civilian, and worked in Wichita, Kansas. But I also knew that I had to think about my future in terms of my education. So I enrolled and finished my baccalaureate and got a master's degree in sociology and went on to get another master's degree in public administration. In between all of that period of time, I did reserves, and just as I was getting ready to graduate, I was doing an internship in Topeka as a budget analyst for the governor. And Senator Bob Dole came to town to meet with the governor. The senator was looking for a veteran. He was looking for somebody of Hispanic descent, and they arranged for me to meet the senator. 2 weeks later, to get a call from his chief of staff, Bill Wolford. He said, Ernie, the senator would like to see you again. He wants you to come to Washington. 2 weeks later, I get a call from Bill. The senator was offering me a job. So I went to Washington in 1977 to work for Senator Bob Dole.
It does require, however, our best effort and our willingness to believe in ourselves and to believe in our capacity to perform great deeds.
Ronald Reagan was elected, and the opportunity came about once again through the senator to work for Ronald Reagan at the White House. I was a special assistant to the president for public liaison. From the White House, I recall the senator calling me up. He said, well, have you had enough of the White House? There's a position I think that you would really enjoy. It's over at the Pentagon. Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Legislative Affairs. On a daily basis, working with the Secretary of Defense, Caspar Weinberger at the time. And again, I'm in the reserves all this time. And the Marine Corps by that time had grown accustomed to reaching out to me for special projects in Central and South America because I was able to speak Spanish. When I had my suit on, I was treated like a 3-star general. And when I had my uniform on, I was a gunnery sergeant in the Marine Corps. I got to know the Commandant of the Marine Corps through my job at the Pentagon, General P.X. Kelly. And one of the questions he asked me, he says, have you accomplished the things that you want to accomplish in life? And I said, pretty much so, General, except for one thing. I wish I could have become a Marine Corps officer. He said, well, when we get back, I'm going to have someone come and talk to you. And lo and behold, I was notified that I'd been selected to be an officer in the United States Marine Corps. Fast forward, so I became a first lieutenant fairly quickly.
Tonight I stand before you, tested by adversity, made sensitive by hardship, a fighter by principle, and the most optimistic man in America.
He was and will always be my mentor, even though he's gone now. I get a call, let's have dinner. Yes, sir. He said, the Republicans are going to take over the Senate. I'd like to have you come back and be Deputy Sergeant at Arms. And I was nominated by the Majority Leader of the United States Senate, Senator Bob Dole, to become the U.S. Senate Sergeant at Arms in 1985. Made captain, and it was during that period of time when I went to the first Gulf War.
No one, friend or foe, should doubt our desire for peace, and no one should underestimate our determination to confront aggression.
About that period of time, the Marine Corps began to include in their what's called civil affairs. Civil affairs wasn't my choice to begin with. I wanted to be an infantry guy. But as it turns out, we would go with infantry into a village right alongside with them. And sometimes we would engage the enemy right alongside with the infantry. Civil affairs has been part of the military for some time. It became a very important part in the first, second Gulf Wars and other engagements throughout the world. And I was in Kuwait, Iraq, Saudi Arabia for about 10 months. In 2003, I was called up to serve Central and South America, which included Colombia, Peru, and Haiti. From there, I was given orders to go to Iraq. That was in 2003.
We have no ambition in Iraq except to remove a threat and restore control of that country to its own people.
The second Gulf War, once again, the best of both worlds for me. My education was a master's degree in public administration with a focus on city management. They weren't called city managers, they were called sheiks. They were called elders in a village, but it was about the leadership of the community. My team were the first ones out beyond the wire before any infantry were. We went out looking for the so-called city officials and mainly where are the bad guys. When I returned in 2005, I became Chief of Staff of the Selective Service System in the George Bush Jr. administration from 2005 till 2010. The list came out and I was on the list for consideration to Lieutenant Colonel. And I said to myself, that's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. I stayed in the Marine Corps for two more years. So I retired as a Lieutenant Colonel. While I love, having a weapon on my hip and a rifle on my side, as I've grown older, the important things in life to me are about helping people, about trying to make a better world for everybody. Amy and I met in 1997, 1998 timeframe in Washington, D.C. when she was there on vacation with my sister, Vina. And we got married in 2002 and have a lot of things to be grateful for. We've had great careers. God has blessed us with a lot of great opportunities. We, however, are most blessed with the fact that God gave us 3 boys and 2 grandchildren. Clearly, throughout my life, I've had a lot of support. My family, on both sides, Amy's family and my family, without them, I don't know that I could have done what I've done. I'd always heard and seen photos of Marines and the history, their involvement in all of our wars. I was just attracted to who they are and what they are, and of course the uniform. And so I wanted to be a Marine. My father was in the Army, and I'm very proud of him for having served in the Army. But from day one, I wanted to be a Marine, and I would go today if they would let me. Again, I love being a Marine. I love being on the edge. I love taking the risk, and I always will. But helping people, I think, has probably what I think of when I think of what really mattered in my life in the Marine Corps.
All right. Can you hear me now? All right. Well, son, can you bring me my cheat sheet there? This is Jordan. He's my second service person. Well, first of all, I wanna thank Paul for what he has done for me and my family. I'm reminded that my wife was here. In fact, right over there when she met Paul. I wasn't here. And she began to tell Paul about who I was and that I had been trying to obtain a service dog for 2 or 3 years. Got on the list, never heard from him. So Paul said, well, have him call me. So I did. And I won't bore you with a long story, but if you can see her, this is the result of my call from Paul to Paul. She's 2 years old. She is by my side 24/7. She, sit girl, sit. She loves my family, but she'll kick the shit out of anybody if they try to do something to me. Before I go any further, and please forgive me, I look out at this audience and I see great Americans, great patriots, whether you served or not. And I want to thank you all for your service. And for those who are not veterans, I want to thank you for your support. As a veteran, I can tell you that I don't know that I could have done it without the support of my family, my wife, my friends, my community. So thank you all. But I would like to take the opportunity to point out a few people that I've known for many years. And one of them is Gunner Walt Schley back there, CW05 Marine. I've known Walt for many years, and he's a great Marine. Another one is interesting fella. When I first met him, even though I was a lieutenant colonel, he scared the shit out of me. And that was then First Sergeant Richard Llewellyn, who's here with his wife, Sherry. And he's now Sergeant Major, retired Sergeant Major. Another great American, great Marine, and was honored to serve with him. Served with him at the Electronics Maintenance Company in Wichita. And from there, I took off and went to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. As Paul indicated, I have my family here, Amy, my wife, Christian, and Jordan. They're from Wichita. They're here visiting, and we always enjoy having them here. As I said, one of the reasons why I'm here tonight is because of my association with Paul. You all know Paul, and you know what F.I.S.H. is all about. What better organization to have in our community to help our veterans? Like I said, I was on a list on various organizations' list to receive a service dog, and 2 years, 3 years, and still nothing. In a matter of months, Paul had me on a list, and in a matter of about 8 months, I was confirmed to receive a service dog. So, and then not only me, but other veterans who are struggling, as he told you tonight about the individual who was having rent problems. I don't know that Paul can ever say no. Paul is ready, and his helpers, his volunteers, always ready to go the extra mile, and we're so lucky to have Paul and his team. In a few minutes, I will share more slides reflecting a snapshot of my Marine Corps career. But first, I want to spend a few minutes expressing a point of view that I have developed in recent years about how I and other Marines, sailors, soldiers, airmen, and Coast Guardsmen view the time we have spent serving our country. In the Marine Corps in particular, we are known and promoted as a band of brothers. As General Mattis, whom I got to know, ended up being a commandant of the Marine Corps, ended up being Secretary of Defense, and the day before I was deployed, he spoke to the 24th MEU at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and he told us about our service in Iraq. Be polite, be professional, but have a plan to kill everybody you meet. That was Mad Dog Mattis. That was classic Mad Dog Mattis. Over the years, the Marine Corps has evolved from fighting the enemy solely on the battlefield to fighting on a different front, working with community leaders, sheiks, religious leaders, tribal leaders, in reestablishing law and order and rebuilding the infrastructure. General Mattis, again, has said it best. when he told his Marines deploying to Iraq, be polite, be ready to kill the enemy, demonstrate to the world there is no better friend, no worse enemy than a U.S. Marine. A personal friend of mine, whom I got to meet when I was working in the United States Senate, and with whom I can relate, once said, for Marines, love of liberty is not an empty phrase, but rather it's displayed by blood, sweat, and tears. I was humbled that my Corps allowed me to serve over 4 decades. This is my friend talking. Yet, as the late Colonel John Glenn, a fighter pilot, an astronaut, and senator put it, the time in the Marine Corps wasn't long enough. And I can relate to that. I still want to go. I still hope somehow that they'll call, I'll get a phone call and ask me to pack my bag. Senator John Glenn was a great American, a great senator, but as he said, most importantly, a U.S. Marine. I will now begin the slide presentation depicting over 40 years of association with the U.S. Marine Corps. It is not a presentation of typical Marine career. I was blessed to have had the unique experience of serving as a reservist, active duty, enlisted, and an officer with a mixed bag of assignments, ranging from a U.S. Marine, a Special Operations Marine / civilian in the Department of Defense, the Department of State, a U.S. Senate staffer for Senator Bob Dole, and as a U.S. Senate committee staffer. Many of these assignments were solo deployments, and some units, small groups of Marines, sailors, and soldiers, and some with foreign military. As I said in my notes here, my career in the Marine Corps is not a typical one. I was enlisted, I was a reservist, I had the pleasure and the honor, the distinction of being a sub-cabinet level official in the Department of Defense. And as I said, when I had my suit on, my civilian suit on, I was treated with protocol rank of a 3-star general. But I was also a gunnery sergeant as a Marine. And the Marine Corps took advantage of that. The Department of Defense took advantage of that. I would get assignments to go different places. I'd leave Washington, D.C. as a civilian, and en route on an airplane or on a ship, I'd get a haircut, and they'd issue me my camis and weapon and so forth. So I'd land wherever I was going as a Marine. I'd gain intel, I'd meet with people, I would go on missions with the foreign military, especially in Central and South America. I'd come back and I'd debrief my superiors at the Pentagon and my respective committees in the United States Senate and the State Department. So there were times when I didn't know who I was or what I was doing, but suffice to say that I knew that what I was doing was important, or they wouldn't have me doing it. But I think the thing that really sticks in my spirit is that many times I was deployed solo. I would go by myself and meet up with foreign military and become one of them, quite frankly. I did a lot of riverine operations in Colombia. I taught at the Colombian equivalent of the Pentagon, their university, their war university, what they call the war university. I got to meet some really bad guys, Noriega. In fact, I went to see if I could meet with him one time, and I couldn't. I mean, everybody told me that I could not. And the night before I was to return back to the States, I get a knock on the door, and it's a bunch of two burly guys and wanting to know if I was up to taking a trip to go see Noriega. That they heard that I was wanting to speak to Noriega. So I did. I got ready and I got with them. And again, I won't tell you all of what transpired, but I ended up on an island not far from the mainland. They took me out in a helicopter, and by the way, on the way to the island, in a helicopter, a Panamanian helicopter, no other Americans but me. I'm thinking, what the hell am I doing on this helicopter? It's dark out. All they got to do is push, and never will Ernie Garcia be seen. But I was also, as I said earlier, I really enjoyed being on the edge. I really enjoyed the challenge. Arrived on the island, and it was like stepping onto what I would think paradise is going to be like. Music, palm trees, waiters, food, alcohol, Cuban cigars. I like cigars. And I'm thinking, you know, I don't really know, I'm not prepared to talk with this guy. He's a little guy. And he came up and was very cordial. We spoke in Spanish, and wanted to know how I could speak Spanish, wanted to know more about me than I did of him. I knew about him already, so, but he was quite interested in who I was and how, what I was doing and what I expected. And I was very honest with him. I said, you know, I told him who I was. I think he already knew, but I told him, I said, you know, I come looking for information about the status of the country and what you plan to do. And I'm making all this stuff up because I don't have a plan. I'm sitting here with this guy who invited me to his island at midnight, and but he listened, and he didn't give me much intel. But he did say, you know, we don't want to do anything that's going to hurt anybody, but we do have our sovereignty. We do have responsibility to the nation, and so he tried to make his case as to why they were doing what they were doing. Scotch, shrimp, caviar, champagne, beautiful women, great cigars. I didn't want to leave. But the time came for me to leave. In fact, he said, we're ready to take you back. So they took me back and took me back to my hotel, and I left the next morning and got to D.C., and I'm thinking, what the hell do I debrief on? There was nothing other than that I met with him. But again, one of the things that has happened to me in my lifetime is, especially now, I sit back and I think, did all of that happen? Did that really happen? And for the longest time, I had some real difficulty talking about it, only because I didn't think it happened. And when my cousin wrote the book, he had done some very good research and had compiled photographs, and he said, if you don't believe it, look at here. This will verify that you were there and that you did it, and so. But it's been a tough thing for me to accept. I don't know why, but the work I did for the Department of Defense as a civilian / Marine was probably the most fearful in many ways. I'll tell you a story about, I left Washington, D.C. and went to Germany. This was on a U.S. government airplane. Again, as a civilian, got to Germany, and they gave me my uniform, my Marine uniform, and flew to Pakistan. And I knew we were going to Pakistan, but that was just about it. Got to Pakistan, and then right down the runway was a Russian helicopter, big Russian helicopter. And the little bus takes us over there. And there's about 3 Americans, and the rest were Pakistani, and what I now have learned to know that the Mujahideen. The Mujahideen was a mixture of tribes from Afghanistan, and at that time, believe it or not, they were our allies. We were helping them against the Russians. But anyway, we take off in a Russian helicopter, and once again, I'm thinking, this can't be true. You know, all of the things, all of the aircraft I could be riding on, I am riding on a Russian helicopter. And we go a ways, and we land on the side of a mountain, and there's nothing. I can't see anybody. I can't see anything. The helicopter touches down, and then all of a sudden you start seeing all these heads popping up from behind rocks, and it's the Mujahideen. And they came, and with some interpreters, they rolled out a table like the one in front of you with food, and interesting how they live. They didn't have chairs like this. They had beat up couches, and they had blankets piled up, and they used as seats. So it was not something that I was used to in terms of a briefing, a meeting, but these were Mujahideen leaders with whom we met and had a great meeting. We gained a lot of information. But again, who in the hell is going to believe me that I did that? But now, as I began to look at some of the things that I have saved, it did happen. And but I often tell people, when people say, "Have you ever been to this place?" or "Have you ever been to that place?" and I say, "Yeah, I've been there," but I don't know anything about it, because I would land, do my business, but I don't remember touring anywhere. And that's what I remember of Afghanistan. It was up in the mountains, and it was with the Mujahideen, the Pakistanis, and a few State Department guys. But like I said, it was a very, very good trip, in that we got some very, very valuable intel. And that's the part that I liked about my job. I was sent into places, into different countries, to kind of sneak around, if you will, particularly in South America, and that was very helpful. And I was even asked if I wanted to go to Korea one time, and I said, "Well, I don't speak Korean," so they didn't send me to Korea. Thank God.
you know, what do you say about 40 years association with the Marine Corps? This, by the way, Sean Wynn, who produced this video, did a pretty good job of it. But yet there's so much more that I recall from time to time. And tonight I thought about, well, what do I talk about? I think this did a pretty good job. My wife and I'll show you in a little bit, my wife put together a kind of where I've been, where I've served, slide presentation. And again, as we put that together, it was difficult for me to remember it as such. You're talking 1966 to 2006. And not just as a muddy boot Marine, but also as a Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, White House, United States Senate / Marine. Who would ever believe that that's such of an assignment? But I was fortunate to have had that opportunity. It is difficult for me, like I have said several times now, to fully grasp the uniqueness of how I spent 40 years in the Marine Corps. I had a lot of help. My wife, Amy, and my family, my community. Senator Bob Dole. I couldn't have done it without him. He for some reason, he liked me, and he was a tough guy, by the way, a tough guy to work for. He was a hard-working guy, and if you weren't working hard, you didn't last very long in his office. And I tell this story about how I worked for him for many years, but never once until later on. But for many years, never once did he say, "Hey, Ernie, you're doing a good job. Keep it up." Never. And I used to think, well, maybe I'm not doing a good job. But he would tell others that Ernie was doing a good job. And after he retired and became ill, progressively became more ill, he began to say to me how much he cared for me, and it was not easy for him to say that. He just wasn't a touchy-feely kind of guy. I experienced a lot of things with him. I went to Italy with him, and there were a lot of staff around, but he asked me to follow him, and we went to where he was shot in Italy. And I was honored that he would ask me to go with him. And I stayed a couple of steps behind him, and he went, and he, I guess, prayed. I don't know. I never saw him to be much of a religious guy, but I'm sure he believed in God. But he stood there and bowed his head, and he wept. I wept, and he turned around and said, "Let's go." That was all. Never spoke to me ever again about it. So it was because of those kinds of interactions with the senator that I began to realize that I was okay with him. He trusted me. He would call me all hours of the night for one thing or another. But I think one of the things that allowed me to become who I became with him was I didn't try to shoot the shit with him all the time, as a lot of the staffers did. I did my work, and I shut up. I didn't speak unless spoken to. Kind of the old Marine training.
You know, if I need you, I'll call you. And that's what he was. And when he needed me, he called me, I reported. So he taught me a lot. PX Kelly, General Kelly, the same way. I got to know him very well, and I owe him a lot. He passed away, and we lost a great man when he passed away. There are others that have been quite instrumental in how my life has worked out. But I say to you tonight that in spite of all the wonderful things and the challenging things and the scary things that I like, that have happened to me, as I've grown older, the most important things in my life today are these two kids right here. My wife, my brothers, my sisters, my brothers here, Doc. Not that I met kings and queens, not that I got to go on a Russian helicopter, that I worked at the White House, even though I'm very proud of that. What matters to me most today are you folks. And KC, I've learned to love this thing. I better not say it because my wife's here, but she's an amazing thing, and she's changed my life. So I've learned what really matters, and you've heard that before. As you get older, you begin to realize, you know, what's really important in life. And for me, it's brotherhood, it's sisterhood, it's family, it's God, it's country. And it's difficult for me today when I take a look at the news and see our flag being burnt, our country being treated the way it's being treated. But you know what? We'll get over this, and we'll make it right again because of people like you, because of organizations like the United States Marine Corps and the Army and the Navy, the Air Force. We're Americans, and we're all patriots. In one way or another, we're all patriots. And what I want to say to you folks tonight is thank you for your service. Thank you for your support for those of you who aren't veterans. Keep up the great work. I'm a member of the American Legion. I'm a member of the DAV. I'm a member of the VFW. I'm a member of the Marine Corps League. I think I'm a member of all these organizations, and they all mean something to me. The American Legion, Dan, is Dan here? Dan, thank you for hosting. I've been here numerous times. What a great venue, and you guys do a great job. Thank you very much. Well, let me get to the next set of slides. If I can, there we go. Let's go over here. Let's go over here. Okay. Many of you will see that mat and have memories, probably all bad memories. That was my first real deployment. It was to Iwakuni. It was in support, combat support of our forces in July. We did logistical support. We did ammo support. We did chow support, maintenance support. And I don't know that I got to go anywhere other than my own little area of operations. But that's where it all started. And that big beast is an F.I.H. It's a fighter. It was the biggest engine in the world with a pilot sitting on top of it. It was very powerful, but it wasn't. It didn't keep up with the Vietnamese newer aircraft. But it was. That's how I started, and then I migrated to the F.4, which I loved, the Phantom. And again, my mentor, Bob Dole from Russell, Kansas. I ended up working for him for many years, and this is at my retirement. I had invited him to come to my retirement, but I didn't hear anything from him, so I thought, he's not coming. Then all of a sudden I see him coming in the back door, and he asked me if I was surprised, and I said, absolutely surprised. But he and Elizabeth came, so I was very honored that he came to my retirement. Then again, the White House, I wasn't there for very long, about a year. I'm proud to have served at the White House. Ronald Reagan is an incredible human being. Not perfect, but an incredible human being. Again, I'm so fortunate to have met him, worked with him. I'll tell you a real quick little story. I got a call from the Chief of Staff, Baker, Colonel Baker. He was a Marine, retired Marine. And he said, hey, Ernie, get over here. I need to talk to you. So I went over. I was at the annex right next door to the White House. So I crossed the driveway into the White House, and I went up to the Chief of Staff, Colonel Baker's office. And he said, how's your Spanish? And I said, well, relatively good. He said, well, here's a pad and pencil. Let's go down the hall. So I followed him, and lo and behold, we're at the door of the Oval Office. And you know, as a good Marine, I just kept following. And the president was sitting at his desk, and he asked us to sit down, and I sat down, and Jim Baker began to tell the president that we were here and that I was going to help him. The president wanted to do a public service announcement, and he wanted to do it in Spanish. And so he told me what he wanted, and so I left, went back to my office, worked on it. Jim Baker called me in about an hour and said, are you ready? And I said, no, not quite. He said, well, you need to be ready. Let's go. So I put something together and went back. We went back into the Oval Office, and he kept calling me young man. Young man? He said, what do you have? And so I presented it to him. And I wrote it out phonetically so that it'd be easier for him. And he started reading, and God, the worst ever. But I kept a straight face, and he kept looking at me, and he said, not very good, huh? I said, we can work on it. He said, you'd be a damn good politician. You lie real well. So that wasn't going to work. So it was just, I ended up writing a sentence that he was able to read in Spanish. But he was a wonderful human being, unlike some of these guys today who don't seem to be in concert with the rest of the American population. He was down to earth. He asked me about my family, how you feeling, how you doing, how's Bob Dole. He made me feel at home. But let me say this to you. After 9-10 months at the White House, the senator called and said, have you had enough of the White House? And of course, I said, well, how do you say I'm tired of the White House? I mean, it's the greatest honor in my life working at the White House, but honestly, I was sick and tired of it. You always had to walk with your back up against the wall because people were always out to get you. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but if you did something that you got credit for, that he or she thought they should have done to get credit for, you got on their list. And I was a special assistant to the president, so my rank wasn't all that high. Most of my colleagues were higher ranking than me, so it was difficult. Senator arranged for me to have an interview at the Pentagon. I accepted, didn't quite know what I was going to be doing over there, but I knew I had hit pay dirt when a driver shows up at the White House. He comes into my office, and he's got another guy with him, and they're moving my lamps and my books and they're moving it to the van, and so I follow them out, and the gentleman that became my driver, his name was Cool Breeze. I don't know where that came from, but he says, "Sir, get in and we'll take you to the Pentagon." So I get in on the front side, the passenger side. He said, "Oh, no, you sit in the back." And I've never sat in the back. It was always shotgun. And he said, "Oh, no, I'll get in trouble if you don't sit." So I did. I sat in the back. I'm sitting there on the ride to the Pentagon thinking, this is unreal. But it ended up being ended up being my driver. I had an office, a huge office with a map of the world on one side. I was literally like from here to the end of that wall from Secretary Weinberger's office. And again, it's one of those things where I would wake up and say, is this really happening? It did happen, and I'm so fortunate to have had that experience. I'm Roman Catholic. I got to meet him 3 times. Again, three times I met him, but once in a lifetime opportunity. We spoke. He speaks or spoke 9 or 10 languages. I went with a delegation of Italian-American congressmen, and there were 5 or 6 of them lined up to shake his hand. And he came to me, and I introduced myself, Garcia, and he started talking to me in Spanish. I responded in Spanish, and he thought that was really great. And then he asked me if I knew Italian, and I said, "Oh, a little bit." So I spoke to him in Italian. And then he turned to the rest of the Italian members of Congress, U.S. Congress. He said, "All you guys ought to be ashamed. None of you can speak Italian, but this guy, he speaks Spanish, Italian, I don't know how many other languages, but you ought to be ashamed of yourself." But I met him 3 times, and the 3rd time he remembered me. But again, he is now a proclaimed saint in the Catholic Church. So I got to shake his hand. I trembled, I cried. To this day, when I think of him, I get chills up and down my back. Again, the arrow there just shows you where my office was. The secretary's office was right here, and I was just right down the hall from him. I told you about Afghanistan. We were up in the mountains. I've been to Kabul, but the most memorable visit to Afghanistan was up in the mountains. Never forget that. Grenada. I don't know if you remember Grenada. We had a conflict there. I was at the Senate at the time, and I was activated and deployed to Grenada to meet with the president of Grenada. Didn't last very long, but it was very, very challenging, to say the least. It was walking on the edge, because you could see the enemy walking up and down the streets. But another great experience. The United States Senate, I became the United States Senate Sergeant at Arms, the only official in the United States that can arrest the President of the United States by order of the United States Senate. But my job was, I got a master's in public administration. It was like managing a small city. It had everything: police, fire, computer, stationery, all kinds of things that you can imagine supports the United States Senate. There it is, Panama again. Yeah. As I mentioned, an island. The island was out in here somewhere. Good times, good cigar. on his dime. Spent a little time in Iraq, 3 times, and it was good. I got to meet a lot of the people. Got to meet a lot of the enemy too, but the people were pretty awesome. Great people, hardworking people, loved Americans, but some of the bad guys were in and about the community, so we had to be really careful. Great experience. And there I am with Doc. You'd appreciate this. About 1/3 of those guys are corpsmen. I inherited corpsmen, I inherited cooks, I inherited dishwashers, I inherited all kinds of guys, and ended up being a squad of mine that we ended up having 600 enemy that we had to take care of. That's not a whole lot of guys for 600 guys, but we had them for about 3 days. Ran out of food, ran out of water, and then our good Marines showed up with food and water. Those are my boys. Colombia, I've mentioned briefly about it, riverine operations. A lot of that was classified. I don't think it's classified now, but I worked with the Colombian Marines. And like I said, I taught at their war college. Great people, great soldiers, great Marines. I fell in love with Colombia. My wife and I have been back to Colombia several times. Great country. Well, you got to be careful where you go any time. But you know, Colombia, the people that we met were just awesome people, good hard-hearted people. Haiti. I don't know if any of you have ever been to Haiti, but don't go. Well, you've been there. It's the. Well, God bless you. Haiti is, and I say this with all due respect to the people, the worst place on planet Earth in terms of poverty, lawlessness, lack of government, health care, non-existent. It's just the world's worst place to be. I spent 9 months there. But we got it taken care of. But it bubbles up every 2 or 3 years. So, and that was a joint command. We had the Brits, we had the French, we had the Canadians, we had the Colombians, and the Chileans. It was a big operation. And these guys, this guy was the chief, and he couldn't speak any English, and I spoke a little bit of Arabic, but he, as I was leaving the last time I was going to see him, he reached over and gave me a little bottle, and you've seen the liquor bottles on the airplanes. It was about that size, and I looked at it and didn't have any identification on it, and then he says, you know, smell it. So it was the most god-awful perfume that I've ever smelled. and an interpreter said, his wife wants you to have this as a gift. And of course, you know, thank you. But oh my God, I think they scooped it off of a pig or something. I don't know. And then when I came back, I went to work for President Bush as the Chief of Staff, and then later on as the Director of the Selective Service System, which is, as you know, is the draft. We don't draft anymore, but the system is ready in case we need to draft, and I hope we never do. The question about women being eligible for the draft is still an ongoing debate, but if we ever do need manpower, we have the system in place to turn on the draft.
So if you've got young children, I think today you still have to register. Yeah, you have to register for the draft. You hear that, boys? But yeah, I'm sorry for taking so long, but I hope I was able to give you some sense of what my life has been like, and I'm thankful to God that I'm here being able to talk to you, because some of my brothers and sisters are not here, and those that are here can't walk or can't talk or can't see. Highway Patrol, that was my last real job. I was the head of the Kansas Highway Patrol, 700 troopers all throughout the state of Kansas. We're known as the best law enforcement agency in the state of Kansas and in the region, with all due respect to sheriff and city police. But we do have a great Kansas Highway Patrol, and I was very fortunate to be a part of them. Thank you so much for your attention. God bless you. Thank you.
Ernie, just hang on though. We're gonna do a little Q&A. Does anyone have any questions for Ernie or
please.
Casey?
Yes. Yeah, Doc.
You ever run into Ollie North?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, I did. Nicaragua. I failed to mention Nicaragua. I was at Nicaragua too. In fact, I flew to Miami with Ollie. He was going to Nicaragua and I was going to El Salvador. But yeah, I knew him quite well. He was a very smart guy. He should have become a U.S. Senator. Just a really bright guy. I think he got a bad deal on Nicaragua. But as a Marine, you do whatever the hell you're told to do. And he was given an assignment to do what he did. And later on, he was left out to dry. And but yeah, good friend of mine. Haven't seen him in a while, but Ollie's a good man, good Marine, good patriot. Anybody else?
Any other questions, comments?
Yes, sir.
I just want to say, I joined the Army in 2005. I know you were managing this selective service and all that stuff. When I joined the Army in 2005, my generation, I was coming out of high school. The draft was a big topic, so I wound up just choosing to go in rather than being drafted. But I know it wasn't easy on the back end, all that stuff. So I want to say thank you to make sure our force is ready, because I was part of the 1st ID for 5 years, and I was part of the 2nd Surge Brigade 2007, 2008, where we lost a lot of good men, but making sure our country's mobilized for any kind of threats, especially with China and all that stuff. I appreciate what you did up there, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think Amy had a comment.
Hey, I know that person.
So, Paul, thank you. Thank you very much for doing this. Ernie doesn't talk like this very often. Yeah. A lot of those, and it's really good to come together and share experiences and be around people who've walked your steps.
And we have a lot of them in here.
We have a lot of them in here.
We have a lot of them in here.
I don't know about you, but I'd like to find that island and go with you to that island.
Did you take any cigars from him?
I didn't take them. He gave them to me. Yes, sir.
Didn't they save some school kids in Grenada, and how big was that invasion force? Because I don't remember.
I'm sorry, I can't.
Didn't they? Oh, I'm sorry. Didn't they save some school kids in Grenada when they invaded?
Well,
how big was that invasion force? I don't remember.
Medical students. They were medical students, and I forget how many there were, but it wasn't a lot. But it was American citizens, and the operation lasted 2 days, maybe. But it was a big deal. They were being held captive, and we didn't mess around. We went there and took care of business.
With Clint Eastwood.
With Clint Eastwood, that's correct. Yeah, that was a good movie.
You said you knew Richard Llewellyn when he was a young man. Has it changed at all?
He's still scary.
Oh my gosh.
Now, in all seriousness, Sergeant Major is a great Marine. I kind of feel like it was the Bob Dole, Ernie Garcia thing. I never really talked to him, but I realized just how good he was, and he led his troops like a Marine leader should. And I admired him. Still today, I admire him. Thank you for your service, Sergeant Major.
I know that Sergeant Major is trying to pick up this trophy at the golf tournament on Monday. What do you think? Not going to happen. You know, you should do much better than most because, you know, you have to wear body armor on several holes. That's nothing for you. Well, Ernie, I just want to say thank you so much for being with us this evening. Somewhere, here we go. You can't leave without one of our, you know, you got to have a F.I.S.H shirt. So.
Everybody gets a cheap t-shirt.
Yeah. Say you've been here, done that. So.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it, buddy.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ernie Garcia. And Casey.
And
okay. All right, so now I think we've come to the part in the program where if you're a veteran and do not have a ticket, a raffle ticket, will you please raise your hand? I think we got everybody.
They call me Loach.
Everybody's got one?
Pleasure to meet you.
Everybody's good?
Crew Chief, Errol's.
All right. Thank you.
Oh, right over here, hon. Yes? Oh, yeah. Oh, well, you know, let me tell you about my day-to-day. Can I tell you about my